Welcome to our monthly Conversations in Innovation podcast. I'm J.J. Mohan, your host and executive director of CIE. These conversations bring together national and international leaders who are leading huge organizations doing incredibly cool things in innovation. The idea of these podcasts is to provide an insight to the students, to the executives in Central PA, to hear about some of these cool things that's happening around the world and maybe get inspired by them, maybe reach out to them, maybe there's an opportunity for somebody to work in these companies. Those are kind of the ideas behind this podcast. And today, we are very lucky to have Mr. Phil Moyer, Global VP of Artificial Intelligence Business at Google Cloud. So it's rare that we get somebody from what we call the FANG companies or the bigger companies in the West that would come in and take their time to talk to us about what's happening in there. So I'm really excited about this. Thank you for Phil for taking the time. So welcome, Phil, to the Conversations in Innovation.
Thank you, Jay. Really excited to be here today.
Cool. So we'll start with a little bit about your background and also your current role. The title I just said, but the titles, many times most people don't really understand what it involves. So tell us a little bit about your current role, but also what's your background?
Sure. So I run what's called the business element of the AI business. So I'm in the engineering teams for artificial intelligence over at Google Cloud. We're producing a lot of the things that you're seeing out in the public around generative AI, things like Bard, but we're building it for the enterprise, for large businesses. And so I run the business strategy and the teams that work with the largest customers around artificial intelligence in the world.
So your background-wise?
Sure. So I grew up a little bit outside of Reading, Pennsylvania, not too far away from Harrisburg University. Went to University of Pittsburgh. I spent about a year almost at Penn State Berks campus. Then went to University of Pittsburgh, studied computer science, and then I also studied a lot around philosophy and epistemology, kind of on the side. So my core degree is in computer science. After college, I started writing software for nuclear submarines for what is today would have been called GE Aerospace. It was called RCA at the time. And then I went over. I found that I didn't love building software for the government, and I went over and actually wrote I was a co-founder of a software company in the special education market. So we built a lot of the software up on Long Island that actually that manages special education departments. And then I got fortunate. I was going to get married, and so I needed to move back down here. And so I actually applied for a job at a tiny little company at the time called Microsoft. They were, believe it or not, just shy of $1 billion. They were just launching Windows at the time, and so I got a chance to join back in the very, very beginning of '91. And I grew up inside of Microsoft, did a whole bunch of jobs over there. I joined in the technical side and ended up running a bunch of businesses. I left there, bought a French software company, sold that, and then I was a CEO of a public company for a while called Odger Online. I did some venture capital, and then Amazon recruited me to go build their financial services businesses, and then Google recruited me to go and do some of the things I just did and am doing now at Google Cloud.
Wow. So, the typical, I grew up in India with an undergrad in engineering and then came over. And so when I came over in the 90s, there was all this, like 96 was when I came here as a grad student. And the typical resume needs to be these big name companies to get, to where you are. So if you don't end up, getting that first job with one of these companies, it's hard. So tell me some of the challenges you faced and, what were your interesting pivots in your journey?
Yeah. It was, when one of the things that has really helped me along the way is I've always been, working on my day job, and I've always been studying for what I want to do, for the future. And I do it on my own time, and I absorb everything. And so a lot of the reasons why I got recruited into Microsoft, or was able to get the job at Microsoft at the time, was I was writing software, but I was also learning about networking. At the time, the PC was just starting to be networked, believe it or not. Like my first job at Microsoft, I had to teach people to use a mouse.
Oh, right.
And the network, the personal computers being networked together was just starting. And so I got certified in a set of technologies, on the nights and weekends, so I could install this software, inside of school districts. And then Microsoft said, "Oh my God, we really need this capability." And so, I would tell you that in each one of those situations, in each one of the cases, you're really doing your job really, really well, and then also studying things over the horizon, things that you're interested in that might pay off a year or 2 years from now, and doing it on your own time. I always tell people in their career to do that every day, just to pick one subject that's not part of their day job that they just get really, really good in, and you become amazed about how it becomes your job.
You have a couple of these biggest companies in the world that you have been part of, right? So let's start with Google. What do you enjoy about Google? Because people have heard this, and I have visited the Google campus, but for the larger audience, it's an incredible campus with all kind of facilities and all of those things. But beyond that, that's certainly one part of it. But what do you enjoy working at Google? And
I would tell you the three cultures could not be more different. I'll give you the answer to the Google thing as I kind of talk about how I contrast it to Microsoft and Amazon. When I joined Microsoft, there was a vision to have a PC on every desktop in every home, and that was Bill Gates' vision. Now, today, when we have a PC in our pocket and on our watch and on our ring, as an example, that seems like like a really outdated vision, but at the time it was extraordinary because these were large mainframes. And so one of the things I learned about Microsoft is just having a really strong vision about how you want to change the world. Really, really important. And that was one of the things I would tell you that Steve Ballmer, Bill Gates, I would even say Satya Nadella today, has a very strong vision about how they want to change the world. Amazon, very strong execution organization. They grew from around 16,000 employees. I think they're well over 1 million employees in about a 10-year time span. And they really are good at execution. And they do things kind of repetitively, and they have leadership principles. The amazing thing about Google is that Google serves over 3.5 billion people on the planet. They serve over 130 languages around the world. They're on a journey to be able to serve over 1,000 languages around the world. I didn't even know there was 1,000 languages in the world before I joined Google. And the thing about Google is that when you have a vision and you execute and you start to serve in the billions of people, you have to include so many voices in your thinking, in your design thinking. And so, one of the areas that we're working on right now is around medicine, AI in the medical space. And it is so incredibly important to have a diversity of voices that look at the output of technology and be able to say, this is applicable to me. This is applicable to my cultural situation. This is applicable to my professional situation. This is applicable to me as a human being. And so the inclusiveness of so many voices and the need to be able to think about at scale, billions of people doing things, they focus, they bring in individuals, around with a high degree of neural diversity so that we design products that are really that are neural diversity aware. And so today, when you use Zoom or you use Google Meets or you use some of the other technologies, if you notice, Google Meets create a feature called the hand raise. And it was because many people that are neurally diverse have a hard time joining a conversation. And so they found that they could join and make it a more inclusive meeting if you just had a hand raise feature, a virtual hand raise feature. And that was actually done by an individual that has, that actually is a neurally diverse individual. And so the thing that's been amazing for me about Google is the sheer number of voices they bring into the development process and into the design thinking and then also into the products themselves.
So, I think I read this somewhere. I'm trying to find that exact quote. I think your CEO, Sundar Pichai, said something like that you build solutions for 1 billion people, right? That's what you just shared about. I'm an adjunct faculty at a different university, and we do these Harvard Business Review case studies for the MBA classes. And some of the things we do in that, which is about when you are focusing on customers that are so diverse with completely different cultures, right? There has been a lot of cases where a company goes in and fails, like Walmart went into China and had this initial challenges, those kind of things. So how do you, Google, while it's a global company, it's still very much US kind of based, right? The headquarters, a lot of the team, I would assume. So how do you address that? Is the same product, you just release it for the worldwide, or you understand those cultures and make changes?
You know, it's one of the reasons why we had to invent the transformer algorithm in the first place. And the transformer algorithm is what's underlying this whole generation of artificial intelligence, was to understand intentions of people. It's a really hard thing. In the early days of computer science, we used the field of mathematics, Bayesian mathematics, to be able to understand what we called mouse groping, which was somebody who's kind of clicking around, you know, and roaming around on a screen, grabbing stuff. And you know, at Microsoft, they figured out, they used to watch how many times where the mouse went and how many times it clicked on something and then clicked on another menu, then clicked on another menu until actually doing something. And so that was the early days of kind of like understanding intentions of people. In this generation, you know, especially with language, it's really, really critical. First of all, like the core transformer algorithm was designed to be able to understand in multitude of languages what is this person actually asking the computer to do for it, and so how can we surface better and better results. A few things that we do is we let many, many, many flowers bloom inside of the organization. Everyone is strongly encouraged to have 20% projects, and you can have a cluster of 20% projects where you might be working with a team of people on something that is not your day job, but it's a really important problem that you think. And so, first of all, is that diversity of I'll call it kind of innovation, and fostering that culture is really, really important. The second thing is that, you know, giving the people the ability to fail and celebrate the failure and kind of move on. There's actually a thing called the Google Graveyard on the web of all the different things that were shut down over time. And we celebrate each one of those things and harvest ideas out of it. The third thing is the listening mechanisms, like really being able to strongly have the listening mechanisms, and then having listening mechanisms not in a like structured way, but in a broad way, so that you can so that more people can get access to the input of what users are trying to intend, and then turning around and actually then fostering those many those innovations. And so when you have that kind of a culture, you have lots and lots of people that are like incented to be you know, innovative, and you bring a diverse population in, you know, of engineers around the world and listeners and designers and everything else, you start to get solutions that have wide applicability around the world. And we're only getting started. I mean, we have so much more to do.
So that brings you, so typical companies, you know, so I work with these companies in the region and where, you know, we talk about innovation and how to approach innovation. And most companies, the challenge is they don't understand innovation, or, you know, one new product is a great innovation, right? A company like Google, which, you know, everybody quotes as, you know, that's where, like you were just giving that example of those 20% projects, right? The rest of the world has heard about this, like, you know, and people say we should do something like Google, right? So in a company like Google, while you kind of touched on that Google Graveyard and all of that, where so many people are continuously coming up with new products, how do you decide which are the ones that actually, you know, and what's that? Is there like a template or process, or is this like, you know?
You know, it's, I mean, a lot of companies kind of like, you know, have this mindset of thou shalt innovate. And it's like, this is, you know, this is our structure for innovation. This is our innovation team. That's a really hard way to innovate, because you like assume that like one group has gotten it right. And so I would tell you that that's the one thing that we don't do. We don't say that there's a single group that's responsible for innovation. The second thing is that these 20% projects, it's really interesting, because at Amazon I could tell you about kind of what they have. They have this thing that's called the working backwards methodology. You know, when you work backwards from a press release, and the press release is very structured in saying, you know, this is what's going to be done for the customer, and then you work into some sketches, and then you work into a minimal viable product, and, you know, you kind of get something out. At Google, we have a thing called 10x thinking, which is like just sheer, raw, unconstrained thinking. Like, and 10x is, you know, if you did this, it would improve the lives of a customer set by 10x. Not just 2x, but a full-on 10x. And so we really incent people to think big. So think about like what we did Loon, which was trying to bring, you know, filling up hot air balloons and floating them and trying to cover the Earth's surface with Wi-Fi, you know, as an example. That's 10x thinking. You know, we've got a project over in what's called we have a group called X, And X-Lake allows you to do these really crazy, innovative projects. We've got one group over there that's called Tapestry that's mapping the entire world's electric grid, figuring out where the transformers are, and then building artificial intelligence models to figure out transmission, like where there's transmission loss, where's the best place to put a solar farm, where's the best place to put a factory. And their whole goal is that their thesis is that there's plenty of power, that's coursing around, but there's so much loss in the grid today. And it's taking 2 to 3 years to add renewable energy into the grid because you can't figure out where to place it and get the permits and everything else. And so you take a customer set and you go, how can I take the time for a solar grid from like 2 to 3 years to 2 to 3 months, to be able to bring online? And you do a 10x thinking. The second is that you do have these 20% projects. These people, you bring in a group of people that are just willing to work on it. A lot of where people fail, I would tell you, is not resourcing the team correctly, like giving the team everything it needs to actually go and move fast. When you have very rigid corporate structures that try to innovate, it moves very slowly. When you have a small group, at Amazon we used to call them 2 pizza teams, 6 to 8 people, and all the people you need, developers, operations people, a salesperson, a marketing person. But you create that small unit, and usually it's 20%ers. You move fast, and your whole goal is to get a minimal viable product out as soon as possible, and then start getting customer feedback. And so a lot of it is it's starting with that thesis, starting with the culture, and then really, allowing the product to see the light of day as soon as possible to get customer feedback.
So it's a great segue into my next question is, what are some of the cool things that's happening in Google that you can share? And is Google building a car?
I can't say Google's building a car. Actually, I don't know.
Fair enough.
I get excited around, I would tell you there's a lot of amazing things that are coming out. The artificial intelligence work is probably the area I'm most excited about. I mean, in college I studied, as I mentioned, a lot of philosophy and epistemology about like the core thing about like how we think, like what is our knowledge, like how do we know what we know? When I'm talking to you today, how do I understand these words and they have meaning to me, and how we do that. In Google, I think that there's a few things. Certainly I'm really excited. When we invented this transformer algorithm, it was trying to understand things, and it's been turned around to be able to generate things. Super excited around AlphaFold. AlphaFold is taking genes and predicting proteins. And so in the level of complexity, we're made up of genes and then proteins and ultimately of enzymes. And so the predicting proteins and doing proteomic research is at the base of actually understanding why our genes do things, why cells have a certain change in structure. And so we recently announced that we were able to predict millions of proteins out of genes that would have taken us in the past, hundreds and hundreds of years of research to be able to discover. And we were able to do that with artificial intelligence and do some predictions. Now, in doing that, you are able to focus where to look for medicines. Treatments are finding a needle in the haystack based on your biomarkers, your genetics, and so forth. And so that contribution to medicine is extraordinary. I'm super excited about that. I'm super excited as well in the cybersecurity space. One of the biggest problems that we've got across the planet is that we have hundreds of thousands of open cybersecurity jobs today. And we just cannot get enough cybersecurity people in the market. And so, I was talking to one state CIO, the CIO of a state government, and he said he had 3,000 open cybersecurity jobs, 3,000. And so we're creating artificial intelligence to be able to help cybersecurity officials or people be able to monitor more rapidly, being able to ingest and understand all the signals that are coming, all the potential threats. So we get really excited about that. We have an investment in an area that's called Mineral, which is agritech. We have an image model inside of Mineral that has hundreds of thousands of pictures of berries, strawberries, blueberries, raspberries. Because when berries show up, one of the biggest problems you've got in our food supply around the world is that they estimate that as much as 40 to 50% is wasted. It's spoiled by the time somebody buys it or it's not eaten. And so we set out to try to drive down spoilage, because then you needed less land to be able to feed the world. And so they have been doing work around berries so that when berries show up in the back of a Walmart or a Costco or an Acme, that they're able to take an image of it and say, these berries are really, really ripe. You should put them on sale now. Or keep them in the back room. You can sell them at full price. And we're doing that across a whole diverse set of foods. And we're also predicting irrigation and land, potential storms. We're doing a lot in societal AI as well. Things like detection of breast cancer. We've gotten, we're working with a number of organizations to be able to get into the 90% range. We're doing flood warnings and fire warnings. We do safe routes out of fires and out of fires and floods. And so there's just a wide variety of things. We're doing a lot for business as well. So, but these are some of the areas I'm probably most excited about.
So, since you lead AI, and it's from an opportunity perspective that we have this whole discussion, but there's a whole other side of the AI that the whole ethical concerns and all of that. So I'm going to read out, every time there's an AI discussion, I usually read out a quote from Musk. And people have we had a faculty member who had a really, disagreement with that. So Musk recently said the biggest issue I see with the so-called AI experts is that they think they know more than they do, and they think they're smarter than they actually are. And this tends to plague smart people. They define themselves by their intelligence, and they don't like the idea that a machine could be way smarter than them. So they discount the idea, which is fundamentally flawed. So what, sitting leading the AI for one of the biggest companies, what are the opportunities, which kind of you touched on, but in a larger way, and what are some of the concerns, and do you kind of agree to these people who are completely freaking out on one side, and what's your take?
I think everybody has watched, we've all seen Terminator, great movie. We've all seen, things coming from outer space and shooting us. And our mind naturally goes to the most dystopian, possibility, the most dystopian outcome. Mankind's invented many human-ending technologies in our existence. Chemical weapons, nuclear weapons, gene editing, biological weapons, drones. We have many, many technologies on the planet Earth that can kill us all today. I started life as a software developer in nuclear submarines, and I would tell you I'm not that great of a software developer, and we're all still here. And so what we have found every step of the way is that there's more people on the planet that are actually worried about these kind of things and think through these kind of things and think through how we can embed safety protocols in, how we create phone lines between two countries that may be warring so that we don't set off nuclear weapons against each other accidentally. We create peace treaties, where we have to we manage biological weapons and considered international crimes. Genetic editing, we just had the first scientist disbarred over in China for editing, human embryos, trying to give birth, having birth given to genetically edited twins, which is against kind of international agreement between scientists and between regulations. The thing I'm most happy about is that he said that, and that others are saying that, because we have technology like blockchain that, quite frankly, was invented, I believe it was back in about 2009, and we didn't have regulation. And you look at what happened with FTX and what happened just recently with Binance, and people lost hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars, and the technology has been discredited. And none of us in AI want that to happen to AI, to this technology. Additionally, I will tell you that one of the reasons why we were so reticent about releasing the technology is we saw how it could get things wrong. You can ask it to do some pretty nefarious things, and it'll tell you how to do those nefarious things. And so we have a whole set of AI principles that we've been working on since 2017. Things like being beholden to human, privacy by design, safety by design, cannot reinforce unfair bias. And we bake that into our code. We don't release things. We rate things, on 18 protocols. Like, is this sexual? Is this political? Does this have hate speech in it? Does it have violent speech in it? And before we actually give an answer, our system is actually evaluating against those things and deciding whether or not it should or should not give the answer. And so if you can write a line of code to do something nefarious, we can write a line of code to protect you. And so I would tell you that he's right. We should not be too smug in our intellect. We should take it serious. We should have good regulations. We should get agreement around the world. And we should treat it like a munition, quite frankly.
Yeah, so one of the things, just to wrap up this piece, a take on from you on what are the specific areas where AI is actually, you mentioned the healthcare space, where it's actually right now ready to be deployed, the executives of companies should be looking at, because there's a lot of people just using ChatGPT for random things versus, where's the real impact right now?
Yeah, I think there's 3 areas that I guide people into. Places where you have a hard time hiring and retaining people. There are, call centers tend to be that area because sometimes you're dealing with really irate people all day long, or really hard problems all day long. Patient intake, as an example, inside of healthcare tends to be a really hard area. But those, like the call center as an example, Stanford University did a study where they evaluated that a call center agent could be about 16% more productive. So either handling 16% more calls or getting off the call 16% faster. But the really powerful thing was that they were able to ramp somebody in 2 months versus 6 months, because they're able to sit there and ask questions. When someone calls in, they're able to actually ask it in the exact language of the customer, and it's able to bring up and summarize information in the language of the customer, like this is the correct answer. And so improving that customer service experience, I really guide people into there a lot. The second is that I tell people that areas where if I could generate more content, I can generate more revenue. So I was over in France, and Carrefour is they're kind of the Walmart of Europe, if you will. And they created a marketing portal where they're able to take their Carrefour brands, so there's Carrefour cereal or Carrefour soap, and they're able to create more marketing campaigns rapidly because it can generate images of, the soap, at a beach setting, or the soap in a mountain settings, or the soap in a college dormitory, and also create content. So if I say, hey, I need to have some recipes that are gluten-free, I'm able to use the Carrefour ingredients and generate a whole set of ingredients. And so generating more content generates more revenue. One of the first areas we did it in that we've started experimenting with is in RFIs and RFPs. When I have to respond to a really big tender from a company when they're asking and multiple companies are bidding, we are starting to use it to generate those RFPs and RSIs responses. The last one is really in the area of you take your people that are like your most talented people, your most highly paid people, like a physician as an example, and what are the things that are doing that are driving them crazy? Like one of the things that every doctor has to do is at night they have to sit and take clinical notes and turn it into a document of care, or they have to turn it into a pre-authorization letter. And I talk to so many doctors that are like, this is just killing me. Like at night, like after I've seen patients all day, all I want to think about, is I want to think about my next day. And they're sitting and actually typing in repetitively same information over and over and over again. When you can do that, you suddenly are making people's lives, a lot better, I would tell you. And so those hire and retrain, generate more revenue, and then also take away some of the what I call drudgery from your most highly paid or most important talent in your organization.
So we talked a lot about the AI. So kind of a segue into that is where I sit, and the larger audience that we have is a lot of students and faculty, and who are doing a lot of research. And you mentioned about the healthcare space, and Pennsylvania is, if you think about the 3 big industries, is healthcare, manufacturing, and agriculture. And there's a lot of noise, or people are interested in AI and all of that. And even within the university, there are people actually doing, research around early detection of dementia and things like that. And personally, my mom has dementia, and so I'm always kind of looking at that. So given all that, are there opportunities for universities to collaborate with, because a company like Google has so much resources and has the bigger perspective and all of that into the AI, and what are the opportunities for universities to collaborate in the research space? And number 2, and a follow-up question is, the students, how do they get involved? What are some of the things they should be studying or evaluating? Because when you look back like 10 years or more than 10 years back, the technology used to change like every 5 years. But now it's like so fast, and every day there's new things coming out, and it's very hard. So, student, faculty, academic world, how does it fit in?
It's such a good question. I think, one of the things, I think there's 2 dynamics. There's 2 types of models right now. There are very large general purpose models that they're calling foundation models. we're building one of these. Facebook or Meta just announced Llama 2 yesterday. OpenAI, has their model. Anthropic has theirs. Cohere has theirs. Generally, those are gigantic models that have been crawled on a massive corpus of information, generally the World Wide Web. And then you've got these domain-specific things like healthcare, like insurance, like corporate bonds, like logistics, as an example, or construction. And those are tinier models that you tend to chain together with larger models. And I'm seeing a trend, and I think there's a raging debate in the AI community as to whether or not the big models are going to be able to do everything or whether or not you're going to have to chain things together. And there's a concept that's called LangChain that kind of chains these things together. Now I bring that, I lay that down to kind of say, we're not sure where all this is going, like where the big models are going or where the small models are going. And so first and foremost is that what I am finding, there's been some fantastic work. I'm trying to recall the university. I believe it was Columbia and one other university did some work around what's called FinGPT, which was they took some financial information, they created a small domain model. And that model was performing like really well and way less expensive than having to use like a Google model or Meta model or an OpenAI model. And so I do think that universities looking at domain specific areas that they're really good at, say agricultural as an example, and experimenting to be able to do some research around specific domains, that right now is a very cutting edge area in artificial intelligence. And so, Harrisburg University being able to pick an agriculture or pick some manufacturing areas, metallurgy or chemistry or biology or kind of one of the professional languages, if you will, super great opportunity. Now, students, and what I would tell you is that companies need to make this decision. Like, how do I achieve some domain-specific capabilities? Either they have to train that, or they rely on one of these domain-specific models that's been finely tuned. And so I think there is a fantastic opportunity. I'm starting to see universities tackle these domains and large companies trying out these models. And they're open sourcing these models, they're writing papers on it, and we're all learning like what the best kind of model is today. Big, small, chained, domain-specific, connected to data sets. So what I would tell you is that's a fantastic area to look. Second area that I tell people is around kind of integrating large amounts of data into there. I think it's a very, like everybody has huge data sets, and integrating structured data into these unstructured models is a really hard space. And so I'm seeing universities start to tackle that. But from a student perspective, this is an extraordinary time to be a student. I mean, it's absolutely an extraordinary opportunity because every single person that I've met is able to get something out of a ChatGPT or out of a Bard. And that tells you that students, like literally high school students, college students, can start working with this AI. It's the most approachable generation of technology we've ever had. And tuning a model is not just a rarefied thing where you have to know vector math and you have to be, an applied math major, or doctorate. You can train a model by saying, giving a thumbs up or thumbs down by saying, yes, this is the correct answer, or no, this isn't the correct answer, or give a more authoritative answer. Like sometimes I have to go and ask the model to give me an answer and it'll be tentative in its response, and you have to go back to it and say, no, please answer this question around medicine in an authoritative doctor's voice. And the model comes back. You're almost like training a toddler. It's like you're almost a psychologist. And so students, what I'm seeing students do are two things. One, they start by doing some of the training in these domain-specific models. They take some of these models and they're just asking questions around an area that's interesting to them. Could be psychology, it could be agriculture, it could be art. And you train the model by actually giving it prompts, asking it questions, and telling it what it did right or wrong. The other thing is that there's a concept that's called embeddings, where you embed in the model. You give it a memory. You say, always remember that the customer service phone number for this bank is this number. Don't let anybody tell you ever differently, because the model can be tricked. And so there's a lot of companies out there. There's a company called Scale AI that's started by a fairly recent college graduate and a number of college graduates, and they're labeling data. And that's a hard portion of this because you got to give the model good data to start to learn. And so students can start all the way over at this idea of saying, this is a red phone, this is a ripe berry, this is a transformer for an electric grid. So they can do the labeling, they can go move up into model training where they can say yes or no around a particular domain and see how to get it out. And then eventually, quite frankly, they can be working between universities and companies to be able to help solve those domain problems. And so there's this beautiful continuum all the way from high school right into use of model inside of a large company that I think is a great opportunity today.
Wow. So that gives us a lot of lot of ideas to think about and probably reach out. But a follow up to that question is, how does Google address diversity and inclusion, right? So the university that I'm part of, or we are, is our undergrad population is very heavily minority driven. There are a lot of black students. They come from, most of them are or a lot of them are first time to the college. So when you think about a company like Google, right? I mean, the best universities, the best students out there all want a job at Google. And so, it's like you don't need to go out and, put your word out. So is there an intentional approach in that whole DEI initiative? And how does, a student in Central PA who just knows the Google name, but other than that has nothing else, how does somebody like that even get in front of, or get an interview or get the application?
Well, I always tell people in Central Pennsylvania, I came from Central Pennsylvania, and if I can do it, it can be done. So, I would tell you first and foremost is that it literally is one of the most core values in our company. Our mission is to organize the world's information and make it universally useful, and that's a big mission. That means, there's 7.8 billion people on the planet Earth, and so we have to make sure that we're providing the right information to the right person at the right time to make it useful in their day-to-day life. And as I mentioned, around how we innovate, diversity is core to that mission. We have probably three ways that we think about it: attract, develop, and retain. I think our goal is that we have to have a diverse set of voices, around the table. And so in attraction, whenever we're doing hiring, it's a core element of every leader. Have you had a diverse slate? And it's not just a diverse slate of candidates, it's also a diverse slate of interviewers. And so you have to be really intentional about this as a leader, and you have to be really intentional about it as a business, where you basically say, you must have a diverse slate before you hire. And by the way, when you're doing those interviews, you have to have a diverse set of people that are doing the interviews, and so that people feel comfortable in the interview process, that there's voices on both sides of the table, and that there's understanding. And I've been through this a lot in my career, and I do find that is, you have to be really intentional about that on both sides, and then you start getting great candidate pools, that are highly diverse, and you get great outcomes through the interview process. And so we look to see, how are we doing in the process. We also really hold ourselves to a high standard about how we treat candidates as well, because it's important that the candidate experience is really good from the moment that somebody starts to interview. And so, in our nature, we're trying to cast a wide net, and trying to bring in many, many different voices. And so that's one thing. In the development space, we're very intentional about it as well. We're taking, diverse, underrepresented populations, and we're very intentional about trying to develop those individuals. We're also looking for career progression. We look across all of Google. We look across those populations, and so we actually try to evaluate how we're doing across all the populations. So are we doing good just across one population? Are we doing well across a variety of populations? We're trying to build a community as well, and so that's a lot about retention. If you do a good job of bringing a community in, and when you look around a table, if there's people that look and feel or sound like you, you tend to feel like you're at home. And that's an important element as well. And so I always starts with attraction to me, but then in that development, taking the time as a leader to make sure that your team and that the individuals of your team, both underrepresented as well as other members of the team, have these stretch assignments, so that when it comes time for review periods, that they've got a body of work that you're able to really represent as a fantastic body of work, and the individual feels like they're being supported. Those communities, we've got a lot of communities at Google, massive variety of communities, of underrepresented groups, of a whole variety of neurally diverse groups, and we celebrate these. We have regular speaking opportunities. If you'll notice in any of our events, we really try to have a diversity of speakers to showcase a lot of different talents inside of the organization. Internally, we do the exact same thing. Authorship of papers. We try to make sure that we have a diversity of people when we issue papers. In AI, we've issued about 7,000 papers in the past 16 years or so. I'm sorry, actually, what am I saying? Since 2017, 6 years. And so we're trying as well to make sure that we have a diversity of voices on those papers as well. So there's some things that we do kind of structurally and as leaders, and then there's things that we try to weave into the fabric to make it a great community.
So one last question on the student and the recruiting, and then we'll switch into the executive side of things. So like the whole Google recruiting process, right? I mean, Google has been very open about you share YouTube videos of the interviews and all of those processes and everything out there. But it also comes down to so is there like mentorship or internships that kind of connects the first time, because otherwise it's people knows people and you have to be part of at some point connected, right? So somebody's completely new. Is there internships or mentorships available from the Google executives or people that was part of Google?
So we are very big on mentorship internally inside of Google, across, and it's one of the things you're rated on as a leader, about like what your mentorship is, both internally and externally. You're encouraged to work with external groups. You're encouraged to create. We've got a number of Blacks at Google as a great example that is really super helpful in our recruiting efforts. And then I would tell you that we look for a number of things in the hiring process. Clearly, leadership. Like, do you do the right thing in a given situation? Are you really committed in a domain that's important to you? So we kind of look at the role related. And then we have this concept that's called Googliness. And remember that concept that I had around 20%? Mm-hmm. We look for people that just have, they're like working on something. They got just something on their mind that's bugging them. And whether or not it's something that they're working on as a side project, or whether or not it's something that, that they have studied that is purely unique, or like it's been a lifelong obsession of theirs. We look for these people that are just like, will look at the world slightly differently. And so what I would tell you is that I do think that when you look online, some of the things that I've seen around YouTube videos and our hiring principles, those are all correct. And we try to, as a community, we try to really fan out and be a part of the community and bring in many voices. And then I would just tell you that I think that just recognize that you show best when you show your uniqueness to Google. We look for really people that they want to be unique, they want to be individuals, and so that's how you show best.
I think this has been an incredibly cool conversation, because that part about how does somebody reach out and what's that process looks like, to hear from somebody senior up in the Google is always kind of clears some of those oh, it's Google. I don't even want to think about it.
I still can't believe I got hired. So I thought I was just way too quirky in the interview process. But that's wonderful. So that's why I tell people, don't be nervous and be yourself in the process.
So now switching to, so we have, like I said, manufacturing, healthcare, agriculture is big in the region. We work with a lot of these executives within those companies, and some of those companies are really big, in the region, but they are not all as technology savvy as you would find in a metro, where it's much more accessible or things like that, right? So AI, you mentioned blockchain, AI, all of this are really relevant to those industries. And we as a center try to create these innovation partnerships where we try to help them with, using a new technology and create like a prototype or things like that. So a company like Google, who is working on the AI and you lead that, how do you partner with, companies or industries within, because you talked about the domain expertise, right? How does somebody, what's that connection look like? Can you give me some examples of corporate partnerships Google has worked with in the AI space, and some of those interesting cases?
Sure. So I think that when we were talking about how can you use this, there's two sides of Google's AI. There's the consumer version of our AI, which you see with Bard, and then we have this enterprise version. Mm-hmm. In the enterprise version, people are worried about controller data. they don't want to make Google's model smarter. If I'm Air Products, in Allentown, Pennsylvania, does not want Google to become, world XBAR model, to become a world expert in the production and distribution of oxygen gases or, hydrogen or nitrogen. And so, there's a lot of focus from those companies around the control of their IP. The second is they're really worried about these models being tricked, the security of these models and so forth. They're worried about cost. These things are super expensive to run. And then they're also, I would tell you, just probably really mostly concerned as well about how do they integrate this into their workflow. And then they say, how do I get started? Like the question. And so I spend, I have a team of people, what we call black belts and solutions architects that go around the world and work, really, really on the cutting edge with like some of the more difficult and challenging customers. Not that they're that difficult to deal with, they just have very hard problems or they have very big problems to deal with. So Priceline is a great example that we worked with around, really reinventing kind of using chat technology to be able to reinvent the travel experience. There's a large company, it's called Workiva, that it underlies roughly about 40% of all the SEC filing processes in the United States. So it's let's call it a $7 trillion worth of SEC filings go through this organization. We help them to be able to do, regulatory, be able to create regulatory filings, for their organizations. Carrefour, as I mentioned to you, is a great example where we help them create that marketing content. Orange, which is a big telecommunications company over in Europe, we help them provide a easier customer service. A lot of it is, I really tell organizations to pick the individual, pick the domain, pick the person that you're trying to improve their life, the productivity of them. Like how are you going to give them back 10% of their time or 20% of their time? Pick the data that they work with and then iterate a few projects, like not just one project, but 2, 3, and the model gets really smart. Remember how I was describing that, you got to train these models and that students can really help with that? You have to do that in a domain. And so I spend, we spend a lot of time taking each industry. So in manufacturing, how can this help the shop floor? How can this help supply chain? How can this help customer service? In healthcare, how can this help with pre-authorization or clinician notes or patient intakes? In financial services, how can this drive, make compliance ambient, or how can I dig in and find deeper insights inside of an asset class? And so we give people a vision for where we think this can be applied. And then we also guide them in how you can do this safely and how you can do it in a very privacy-centric way, where you're not enhancing our model or OpenAI's model or Meta's model. And so we spend a lot of time around, I would say, domains, security, risk, and then trying to get something to production quickly. The best companies just go, let's just get something in production, kind of like the innovation thing that I was talking about earlier. It's like let's just get something started and see where we have success and failures.
So since you mentioned about the energy consumption, is that because the whole blockchain, there was this whole just too much energy consumption, and that became like a whole another part of this whole ethical conversation of this, right? What's the AI, that side of the story looks like, and is that something that you worry about, or is there solutions coming around that? Or
this model, I think I can safely say, is the most expensive and processor hungry and power hungry model that we as computer scientists have ever tried to consumerize. Like this thing is big. When you probably heard early on, like ChatGPT, I think they had something like a couple 100 billion tokens, and a token is 4 characters, like a 4-character word. I think we talked about the fact that we had a Palm model that had 540 billion tokens. And when you run that kind of a model and you ask a question, it's literally wading through all these tokens. And so the bigger the model, the more expensive it is to run and the longer it takes to respond. I like to joke that, because I grew up outside of Reading, you don't have to, if I want to answer the question, where's the dipstick in my Ford truck, I don't need to wade through all of Taylor Swift's boyfriends and every song she's created and every World Cup participant. And so that's one of the reasons why I was talking to you about small models and domain-specific models. And there's a concept that's called distillation that really helps us tighten down the model and not spin the tokens. Like we estimated that if we ran, there's been estimates that if we ran that 540 billion token model, it could cost as much as $1,000 per user. Like you take 1 million users and you've got $1 billion of compute. You take 1 billion users, like we have 3.5 billion, you have $1 trillion of compute. The math just doesn't work. And so, it's an exciting area. Like we're starting to do least cost routing of models. The other thing that's really important about this is that we're really proud to be the only, to be a carbon neutral cloud. So the notion around sustainability in this context is really important. And so as we all start to use AI, it holds many wonders, but it definitely is power hungry. And all of us in the computer science field we're working really hard to try and drive down the cost and keep the value high.
So I know your role is more AI, but as a senior executive, a big company sitting out there outside of AI, right? What are some of the other technologies that fascinates you, that excites you, that you're seeing out there, and how fast are some of them? Because one of the things I want to throw out there is quantum computing, because I've heard Google, connected to that in some conversations and papers. So what are some of the other things that excites you? And
if I could say one thing to students right now, you are on the precipice of some of the most amazing technologies. Everything that you've seen inside of movies is about to become true. AI is going to help us dramatically in the healthcare field, radically personalize medicine. And so I'll park that on the side and make sure that you have a pill of one, or a treatment of one for an individual, wholly unique. And so that's going to be exciting in the healthcare field. And that's going to be for agriculture as well. We'll break through, way safer fertilizers and way safer treatments and way better, yielding farms and so forth. Robotics is about to explode. If I had somebody say to me, somebody said to me, believe it or not, a guy said to me, the PC is going to be a big thing. And I had a job offer to go to Microsoft, and I had a job offer to go to this other company that did mainframe programming. And when I was programming the nuclear submarines, these were massive computers. And I said to my wife, I'm taking the job with Microsoft. She said, who's Microsoft? I said, well, they believe a PC is going to be on every desktop. And they're like, no way. And this guy had said to me, he goes, the PC is going to be huge. Just trust me. And I went into it, and sure enough, it kind of became a thing. And robotics, because of what we're doing with AI, compute keeps getting smaller and smaller and more powerful and more powerful. And so you're going to see robotics, the entire field of robotics. Think about the creation of the entire automobile industry is about to happen in the robotics industry. The other thing that I think that you're going to then suddenly start to find is that we're going to also have, you're starting to see the first flying cars. You're seeing drones. And so you're going to see us, come off of the earth. I think there's going to be, as well, space is going to be, the students today, I have two sons that just recently graduated college, and I say to them, space will become an industry again. When I was younger, it was kind of an industry, but it was run by the government. And computing used to be run by the government. The internet used to be run by the government. And when it stopped being run by the government, it all of a sudden became the internet we all depend on today, and it sits in your pocket. And space is now becoming an industry. And so you have an amazing industry that's about to explode. When I say these things, cloud computing is about a $1.5 trillion, it's going to become a $1.5 trillion industry. Today it's about $400 billion. AI today is about a $100 to $200 billion industry. By 2030, it's going to be a $1.5 trillion industry. Robotics will be another $1.5 trillion industry. Space will be another $1.5 trillion industry. And so there's a lot of focus around what jobs are going to be taken away. And I'm telling you that there's 3, 4, 5 more $1.1 to $2 trillion industries are going to be created when all these wonderful jobs are going to be created. And it's not going to be all done by robots, and it's not going to all be done by AI. And so I would just tell you that students should really look broadly about the different fields, because there's a whole bunch of things that seems like science fiction that's about to start happening.
Two things I want to wrap up with. One, what's the one advice you would give to the executives of companies out there that are looking at the speed of this technology and trying to figure out, should we be able to understand all of this at the same speed, or how do we, I'm talking about the CEOs, not the technology guys, but the CEOs who's running the companies, right? What would be the advice you give to them to, because there's a philosophy background that you also come from, how do you assess these things, right? That's one part. The second is for people who are starting, because I have a startup background, and we work with incubator. We have an incubator where a lot of people come in and starting new things. What are some of the areas they should be looking at from a problem solving, right, that you see from the bigger picture?
I would tell you that, I get an opportunity to speak to a lot of board of directors, and I demystify the technology. I kind of explain what the algorithm is, first of all, what the core transformer algorithm is and what's been done. And I try to say to them that AI holds an equal amount of risk as opportunity. And that's most things in business. And so you have to be aware of the risk, but you also have to understand the opportunity. You have to have specific goals. So I talk to a lot of boards that they want to talk to me all about the risk. And I'm like, I'll talk to you about the risk, and I'll tell you about how you can code around that risk and how you can solve that risk. I mean, we have risk today in cybersecurity of somebody hacking into your systems. We have risk today of your technology getting things wrong, but we still use it. I also, though, talk to them about setting goals. I talk a lot about productivity goals. People fear the AI because they think it's going to replace them, but when you suddenly say, hey, what if we could give you a day back in your life? People are like, oh my God, that's fantastic. Or what if every student was able to learn in precisely the format that they learn in? When I have to learn something, I have to read and I have to underline it. That's how it commits to memory. Right. I have other people that when they hear it, that's how they learn best. When they see it on a board in an image, and so what if you can get the best education in the format that's available, that you need? And so I tell business owners, like, what's about to happen is that in the same way the graphical user interface, when I was just starting out with a mouse, became a thing, and then HTML, the web, became a thing, and then mobile phone became a thing, a conversational interface is going to be added to every single system that you use. And so the way we're conversing today is the way we're going to start conversing with our computing. And so get ahead of that, put conversational interfaces on, manage the risk, leverage the technology to really give your talent the best work experience they possibly can and to serve your customers the best. But you have to get started, because if you don't get started, your competitors are. And probably the best people, quite frankly, to get started are the generation that are inside of Harrisburg University and so forth that are so comfortable actually using these technologies in their day-to-day lives. And so you get individuals that are comfortable living between the world of like business, the consumer space and technology, but you have to get started. I would tell you, first and foremost.
Yeah. So the founders, that are looking at new opportunities, what's the curve looks like, and what are the problems they should be looking at?
Sure. So there's a whole bunch of new problems. Think of this as the whole internet's being created, or the mobile phone's being created, and entire industries are going to be created around this inside of IT. First of all is down at the actual management of the models and the operations. Huge number of things. Like today we have security, like there's a lot of IT security organizations that do pen testing to check to see if they can get into a company. There's going to be a concept called red teaming to make sure models are staying on tasks. But just assume that there's going to be a whole bunch of these wonderful things to be able to help the models, monitor the models, manage the models. Then you take the next domains up, HR, legal, tax, all of those things can be enhanced with this technology. And then you've got retail banking, or you've got corporate actions inside of capital markets, and each one of these things is going to be impacted. For the startups, literally every single industry that you work with is going to have AI brought to bear on it. And you can get 10, 20, 30% productivity improvements. And so pick a domain and get good at it with AI, with a model, domain model, a model that you train, with content that you train, and you're going to be shocked as to how many opportunities there are to be able to create value for your customers. But I would tell the startup founders to get started as well.
Thank you very much, Phil. This has been an incredibly insightful conversation, and like I said in the beginning, we're very excited when we have access to somebody like you. And so thanks again for your time and for the insights. And we hope to continue this conversation over the coming months and years.
Absolutely, Jay. Really, really appreciate it. And thanks for everything you do as well. So this is wonderful. Thank you.